I never thought silence could be something you had to buy back. But standing on the porch of my grandfather's house that first morning, coffee steaming in the cool air, I understood what $340,000 had really purchased. Not just 2 acres of land or a weathered structure built in 1920. I'd bought distance from everything that had broken me. The red paint was faded but still recognizable. My grandfather had mixed that exact shade himself, standing in this same spot over a century ago with brushes and buckets, building something meant to outlast him. He'd succeeded. The house had outlasted him by 30 years, and now it was mine again. I'm Graham Hollister. For 12 years I chased stories nobody wanted told, corruption investigations, police misconduct, financial fraud. I was good at it, maybe too good. My marriage couldn't survive the obsession, the midnight phone calls from sources, the weeks spent buried in documents while my wife ate dinner alone. 6 months ago, I walked away from all of it. Sold my downtown condo, packed 2 suitcases, and came here. The land had passed through distant relatives after my grandfather died. None of them wanted it, too rural, too quiet, too far from anything that mattered to them. When I called my cousin about buying it back, she sounded relieved. "It's yours for market value," she'd said. "Nobody else wants to deal with it." I'd done my homework before signing anything. 12 years as an investigative journalist taught me to verify everything twice. I pulled 50 years of deed history from the county recorder's office, checked for liens, easements, covenants, anything that could complicate ownership. Most importantly, I verified there was no homeowners association. I'd read enough nightmare stories about HOA overreach to know I wanted nothing to do with one. The county records were clear. This property had never been part of any neighborhood agreement, never subject to any HOA bylaws. It was mine, free and clear, with documentation backed up in 3 separate cloud accounts. Old habits die hard. The first week, I installed security cameras at each corner of the house. 4 high-definition units with motion sensors and automatic cloud backup. Inside, I set up discrete audio recording in the main rooms. I told myself it was standard home security, but I knew better. After years of interviewing sources who later claimed they never said what they said, I'd learned that proof was everything. The restoration work started slowly. The electrical system was ancient knob-and-tube wiring that needed complete replacement. The wooden floors were scratched and dull, hiding beautiful grain underneath decades of neglect. The red paint needed refreshing, but the bones were solid. My grandfather had known how to build things that lasted. I spent those first days walking the property boundaries, finding his old survey markers still embedded in the ground. I cleared brush, trimmed overgrown branches, and made lists. Stripped the floors. Rewire to modern code. Repaint in that exact historical shade of red I'd found in the county archives. I applied for all the necessary building permits, submitted plans, paid fees. Everything documented, everything legal, everything by the book. Evenings, I'd sit on the porch listening to wind move through pine trees that had stood here longer than I'd been alive. No traffic noise, no sirens, no neighbors' arguments bleeding through apartment walls. Just wind, birds, and the occasional creak of old wood settling. This was what I'd been chasing, not just absence of noise, but presence of peace. My grandfather used to sit here in an old rocking chair, drinking black coffee and watching sunsets. He'd tell me stories about building this place with his own hands, about what it meant to own something nobody could take from you. "Measure twice, cut once," he'd say, tapping his temple. "Applies to everything worth doing." I carried that lesson into journalism, where one wrong fact could kill an entire investigation. Now I was carrying it back here, applying it to restoration work and to reclaiming the quiet life my grandfather had lived. At night, I'd open the physical photo album, not digital, the real thing with plastic sleeves and fading pictures. My grandfather in 1958, standing before this house with a hammer in his hand, grinning with pride. He'd built something that would outlast him, and he knew it. I wanted to honor that legacy with care, with precision, with the same attention to detail he'd taught me. $340,000 hadn't just bought land and walls. It had bought distance from chaos, room to breathe, and the kind of stillness that felt earned after 12 years of burning myself out chasing other people's corruption. The barn out back was salvageable. The well still worked. The septic system needed inspection but seemed functional. I wasn't rushing anything. Time was the entire point of coming here. I sat on the porch that fifth evening, watching the sky turn orange and purple behind the trees. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't care. I was listening, really listening to the sounds my grandfather had loved. Wind through leaves, birds calling to each other, the gentle creak of wood settling into itself after another day. I'd found what I came for: peace, silence, home. And I had no idea someone was about to try taking it all away. The knock came on Thursday morning at exactly 9 o'clock. 3 hard raps, purposeful and demanding. Not the friendly knock of a neighbor stopping by. This was the knock of someone who expected compliance. I was in the kitchen replacing a corroded pipe fitting when I heard it. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked to the front door, glancing at the security camera feed on my phone. 2 people stood on my porch, a woman in a gray suit and a man in what looked like a police uniform. My stomach tightened. Not fear, recognition. I'd interviewed enough law enforcement in my career to spot the real ones, and something about this guy felt off. I opened the door. The woman smiled immediately, the kind of professional smile that never reaches the eyes. She was maybe 50, well-dressed, hair pulled back tight. She held a leather clipboard like it was a badge of authority. The man beside her stood with arms crossed, trying to look intimidating. The uniform was close, navy blue, patches on the shoulders, utility belt, but there was no badge number on his chest. No name tag. The logo on his shoulder looked official from a distance, but up close it was slightly blurred, like a low-resolution printout. I cataloged these details automatically. Old habits. "Mr. Hollister," the woman said, her voice smooth and confident. "I'm Vanessa Kirkland, representing the Homeowners Association for this area. This is Officer Finch. We need to discuss a serious violation." She said it like she was doing me a favor, like I should be grateful she was here to set me straight. I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my phone in my pocket with the recording app already running. Always document. That rule had saved me more times than I could count. "What homeowners association?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "I checked the county records before I bought this property. There's no HOA registered for this area." Vanessa's smile didn't falter. She pulled a document from her clipboard and held it out. "These are our official bylaws. You're in violation of multiple regulations. The structure needs to be demolished within 30 days or we'll be forced to take legal action." Demolished? She just told me to tear down my grandfather's house, the house he'd built with his own hands in 1920. I took the document and glanced at it. High-quality paper, professional formatting. Someone had put effort into making this look legitimate, but it wasn't notarized. No official seal, no filing date, just words on expensive paper. "I'd like to see the authorization documents," I said. "HOAs have to be legally established. I need proof this organization has jurisdiction here." Finch stepped forward. "We have full enforcement authority. If you don't comply, we'll initiate eviction proceedings. We've handled situations like this before. Everyone cooperates eventually." His voice had an edge meant to intimidate. I'd heard that tone before from people trying to shut down investigations. It never worked on me then. It wasn't going to work now. I pulled out my phone and made it obvious I was taking photos of the bylaws document. Vanessa's smile tightened slightly. "Mr. Hollister, this isn't a negotiation," she said. "The regulations are clear. You have 30 days. I looked at Finch again, really looked at him. "Can I see your badge, identification?" He shifted his weight. That's not necessary in this situation. Yes, it was. Any real officer would have provided ID immediately when asked. I'd requested badge identification from dozens of cops during interviews. They always complied. It was standard procedure. This guy was deflecting. I'm going to need documentation that this HOA is legally registered with the county, I said, keeping my tone professional. And I'm going to need verification of your enforcement authority, Officer Finch. I emphasized the word officer, just enough to let him know I was questioning it. Vanessa's composure cracked for just a second. Mr. Hollister, I understand you're new to the area, but these regulations exist for everyone's benefit. We're simply asking you to comply. Asking, that was the word she used, but everything about this situation was a demand. I appreciate you stopping by, I said, but I won't be taking any action until I've verified the legal standing of your organization. If you'd like to provide registered documents from the county recorder's office, I'll be happy to review them. I handed the bylaws back to her. She didn't take it. Keep that copy, she said. You'll need it when we proceed with enforcement. Finch pulled a business card from his pocket and dropped it on the porch railing. I glanced at it. No address, just a phone number and a post office box. Another red flag. They left without another word. I watched them walk to a black sedan. No government plates, no official markings, just a regular car. I stood on the porch for a full minute after they drove away, thinking. Then I went inside, sat down at my grandfather's table, and opened my laptop. The recording from my phone was already uploaded to cloud storage. Clear audio of the entire conversation. Vanessa claiming HOA authority. Finch refusing to show identification. Threats of eviction and demolition. All captured. I pulled up the county recorder website and ran another search. Deed records, covenant records, HOA registrations. Nothing. I expanded the search to surrounding areas, checked state corporate registrations for any entity with Kirkland's name. Found 3 LLCs, all registered to residential addresses, all with vague business descriptions. I took screenshots of everything and organized them into folders, evidence, chain of custody, metadata preserved. This was what I did. This was what I was good at. I examined the photos of the bylaws. The font was Garamond, unusual for official documents. Most government forms use Times New Roman or Arial. The margins were even, but there was no watermark, no embossed seal, no filing stamps. It looked professional because someone wanted it to look professional. But it wasn't real. I sat back and stared at the red walls of my grandfather's house, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. That investigative instinct, that pull toward a story that didn't add up. I'd come here for silence, for peace. But someone had just walked onto my property and tried to take it with fake authority and empty threats. That wasn't something I could ignore. Not because I wanted to fight, but because I'd spent 12 years proving that truth mattered. That you didn't let people get away with lies just because they dressed them up in official language. I opened a new document on my laptop and started typing. Timeline. Thursday, 9 a.m. First contact with alleged HOA representative Vanessa Kirkland and alleged enforcement officer Garrett Finch. Claims made. Documentation provided. Red flags identified. This was muscle memory. This was what journalists did when someone tried to sell them a false narrative. We built the real story, piece by piece, until the truth was undeniable. The email arrived within 2 hours. That was fast, suspiciously fast. Mr. Hollister, this is your final courtesy notice. Failure to comply with HOA regulations will result in legal action. We strongly encourage you to reconsider your position. I saved the email, forwarded it to my personal archive, screenshotted the metadata, then replied with 3 words. See you in court. I meant it. The county recorder's office opened Monday morning at 8:30. I was there at 8:15, waiting outside with my notebook and laptop bag. The building was old brick, the kind of government architecture that hadn't changed in 50 years. I'd been to dozens of places like this, chasing paper trails for stories. Public records were the backbone of investigative journalism. You couldn't fake what was filed with the government. Either something existed in the records or it didn't, and if it didn't exist, that told you everything. The clerk was a middle-aged woman with reading glasses on a chain. She looked tired already. I approached with my ID and a polite smile. I need to pull all property records for this address going back 50 years. Deeds, covenants, HOA filings. She typed into her computer, waited, typed some more. It's going to take about 20 minutes to pull everything. You can wait over there. 23 minutes later, she called me back with a stack of documents maybe 2 inches thick. I paid the copying fee and asked for certified copies of the deed and a notarized statement confirming no HOA registration existed for my property. She looked at me with mild curiosity. Someone claiming you're in an HOA. I nodded. Someone's claiming a lot of things. She stamped the documents with her official seal. Good luck with that. Back home, I spread everything across my grandfather's table. Deed history going back to 1923. No gaps, no covenant agreements, no HOA bylaws recorded at any point. Clean chain of title, straight to me. I scanned every page, uploaded them to 3 separate cloud accounts, organized them by date. Then I started the next phase, background checks. People left trails. Tax records, business filings, court documents, social media. You just had to know where to look. Vanessa Kirkland had a trail. 3 failed LLCs between 2009 and 2015. Bankruptcy filings. Civil suits for breach of contract. She'd been in real estate for 20 years, but her record was messy. Complaints with the state licensing board. Nothing that got her license revoked, but enough to show a pattern. I found a forum post from 3 years ago, someone complaining about a woman named Kirkland trying to pressure them into selling property below market value. No proof it was the same person, but the pattern matched. Garrett Finch was easier. A simple search of the state law enforcement database showed nothing. No active certification, no employment history with any police department. I expanded the search and found him, terminated from a county sheriff's department in 2019 for excessive force during a traffic stop. His certification had been revoked. He couldn't legally work as a cop anymore, but he could buy a uniform online and pretend. Impersonating an officer was a felony, but that only mattered if someone reported it. I was reporting it. I began drafting a report, facts, timeline, evidence. Same discipline process I'd followed on every investigation. I documented every interaction, every red flag, every piece of evidence showing this was fraud. The fake bylaws, the unlicensed enforcement officer, the unregistered HOA, the threatening emails. When I finished, it was 37 pages long. I sent copies to 3 agencies: the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, the County Sheriff's Office, and the State Licensing Board for Real Estate Agents. Each submission was documented, confirmation emails saved, receipt numbers recorded. I wasn't just building a defense, I was building a prosecution. That afternoon, I installed 2 more cameras, hidden angles covering the driveway and side yard, motion sensors linked to my phone. If anyone came back, I'd know immediately. I wasn't paranoid, I was prepared. There was a difference. The notice appeared on my door on day 12. Bright yellow paper taped at eye level, bold black letters, violation notice, unauthorized construction, immediate cease and desist required. It looked official except for one detail. The header said Springfield County. I lived in Riverside County. Amateur mistake. I pulled it down carefully, preserving the tape, and photographed it from multiple angles. Standard printer stock. Generic county seal, slightly pixelated. I scanned it, saved it in my evidence folder, added it to the timeline. Day 12. Escalation. Fake legal notice attempting to create appearance of government involvement. 2 days later, the county code enforcement office called. A tired-sounding woman on the other end. Mr. Hollister, we received a report that you're conducting unpermitted construction at your property. I'd been expecting this. I have all my permits filed and approved. Would you like me to send you copies? Pause, sound of typing. Yes, please, we need to verify. The complaint came from Miss Kirkland. Of course it did. I emailed the permits within 5 minutes. The woman called back an hour later. Everything checks out. The complaint was false. We're noting that in our records. I apologize for the inconvenience. Can you tell me if this person has filed false reports before? I asked. Another pause. I can't share that information, but between you and me, this isn't the first time we've gotten questionable reports from that name. That was enough. Vanessa had a pattern. She weaponized government agencies, filing false complaints to create pressure. Harassment by proxy. The flyers came next. Day 16. White sheets tucked into mailboxes up and down the street. I grabbed one from my neighbor's box. Warning to residents. New homeowner refuses to comply with safety regulations. Property values at risk. Signed by the Riverside Community Management Association. Another fake name. Another attempt to turn my neighbors against me. I took photos, collected flyers from 3 different mailboxes, documented everything. Same printer quality, same paper stock, same source. That afternoon, I noticed something. Neighbors who used to wave suddenly didn't. One couple crossed the street instead of walking past my house. Social isolation. Classic tactic. Make the target feel alone. Make them think the community was against them. But I'd been isolated before. I'd worked on stories where sources dried up, where colleagues thought I was chasing nothing. I knew how to function alone. It was time to find allies. I started with the house directly across the street, an older woman, maybe 75, who I'd seen gardening most mornings. I knocked on her door with a plate of store-bought cookies. Old-fashioned approach, but sometimes the old ways worked. She opened the door, looked at me with cautious eyes. Miss Brennan, I said, I'm Graham Hollister. I bought the red house across the street. I was hoping I could talk to you for a few minutes. She studied me, then stepped back. Come in. Her living room was neat, filled with photos, family, grandchildren, a life lived in one place for decades. You knew my grandfather, I said. He built that house in 1920. Her expression softened immediately. I remember him. Good man. Always helped people fix things. You look like him. That broke the ice. We talked for 20 minutes. I told her about the restoration project, about the fake HOA, about Vanessa and Finch. She listened, nodding. Then she said something that changed everything. That woman came to my house 2 years ago, said I was violating regulations, wanted me to sell. I had my son look into it. He's a lawyer. He told me it was nonsense. She disappeared after that. I leaned forward. Would you be willing to make a statement about that? Write down what happened? She nodded. If it helps you, yes. I don't like bullies. Your grandfather wouldn't have either. I left her house with a handwritten account of Vanessa's visit. Another piece of evidence. Another victim. Another crack in Vanessa's operation. Over the next week, I talked to 6 more neighbors. Most were wary at first, suspicious because of the flyers. But once I showed them the evidence, the fake documents, the proof that no HOA existed, they started sharing their own stories. 2 of them had been approached by Vanessa years ago. One had sold his property after months of harassment. She wore me down, he said, voice bitter. I just wanted it to stop. Sold for $180,000. The property was worth 400. I lost over 200,000 in the house I planned to retire in. I gathered everything, recorded interviews, written statements, a growing list of victims. 4 confirmed cases in the immediate area. Vanessa had been doing this for years. The pattern was clear: target properties, usually owned by elderly residents or new buyers. Create fake authority. Apply pressure through fake legal notices, harassment, social isolation. Exhaust the target until they sold cheap. Then flip the property for profit. It was systematic, calculated, fraud on a scale that went beyond my property. I added up the numbers. 4 known victims. Average loss of 200,000 per victim. That was 800,000 in documented fraud, and those were just the cases I could verify locally. This wasn't a nuisance. This was organized crime. That night I received an anonymous text. No caller ID. You don't know who you're messing with. Stop now before it's too late. I screenshot it, saved the metadata, forwarded it to my lawyer. Then I replied, every threat you make is evidence. Keep going. The truth was, I wanted them to keep going. Every action they took gave me more material, more proof, more ammunition. They thought they were pressuring me. They were actually building my case. 2 days later, things escalated. I was working on the upstairs electrical when I heard breaking glass. I rushed downstairs. A rock had come through the front window, wrapped in a note. Last warning, get out or we'll make you. I photographed everything. The rock, the note, the broken window, the glass scattered across my grandfather's wooden floor. I called the police, the real police this time. The officer who responded was professional, thorough. He took my statement, photographed the damage, collected the rock and note as evidence. This is harassment, he said. Possibly criminal threatening, will increase patrols in the area. I showed him everything else. The fake HOA documents, the impersonation of Officer Finch, the threatening emails, the false code enforcement complaints. He took notes, grew more serious with each detail. This is bigger than vandalism, he said. I'm forwarding this to our fraud division. They'll want to talk to you. After he left, I sat in my grandfather's chair, looking at the broken window, feeling something shift inside me. I'd been methodical up to this point, building a case, gathering evidence, following procedure. But this was different. They'd come to my home. They'd thrown a rock through glass my grandfather had installed over a century ago. They'd crossed a line. I'd spent 12 years investigating corruption from a distance, writing stories, exposing fraud through articles and reports. But this was personal now. This was my family's legacy, my peace, my home. I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was going to war. I cleaned up the glass, boarded up the window temporarily, and opened my laptop. The evidence file had grown to over 200 pages. Documented fraud across multiple victims, fake documents, impersonation, harassment, property damage, criminal threats. I had everything I needed for civil court, but now I wanted more than money. I wanted prosecution. I wanted consequences. I called an old colleague, a reporter at the local paper who I'd mentored years ago when she was just starting out. She owed me for teaching her how to build sources and verify facts. Emma, I said when she picked up, I've got a story for you. Organized real estate fraud targeting elderly homeowners. Fake HOA, fake cop, fake documents. At least 4 victims, probably more. Estimated losses over $1 million. Pause, then, how solid is your evidence? I smiled. I've got 40 pages of documentation, recorded conversations, fake legal documents, victim statements, and background checks showing prior fraud. It's airtight. She agreed to meet the next day. I spent that evening organizing everything into a presentation format. Timeline, evidence exhibits, victim impact statements, photos of fake documents side by side with real ones, highlighting the differences. audio clips of Vanessa threatening demolition, video footage from my security cameras showing Finch in his fake uniform. I built it like an investigative package, because that's what it was. The silence I'd bought back was gone now, shattered like the window glass scattered across my floor. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some things were worth fighting for. I looked at the boarded window, at the red walls my grandfather had painted, at the home he'd built to last. He'd taught me that precision mattered, that details were everything, that you built things right so they'd endure. I'd applied those lessons to journalism. Now I was applying them to justice. And I wasn't stopping until Vanessa Kirkland faced every consequence she'd earned. Emma arrived the next morning with a notebook and skeptical eyes. She was a good reporter. I taught her that skepticism myself. I walked her through everything for 2 hours. She took notes, asked sharp questions, requested copies of every document. "This is bigger than I thought," she said finally. "Give me 4 days to verify independently. If it checks out, we run front page." While Emma worked verification, I made my second move. I posted a detailed account on a legal advice forum, not social media, too volatile. I used a throwaway account, kept identifying details vague enough to protect privacy but specific enough to be credible. The post was methodical: statement of problem, evidence presented, legal questions posed. I attached photos of the fake documents with personal information redacted. I didn't editorialize. I didn't rant. I just presented facts and asked for input. The response was immediate. Within 6 hours, the post had 15,000 views. Comments poured in. Legal advice from actual attorneys. Similar stories from people in other states. Warnings about HOA scams. Links to news articles about related fraud cases. 3 people messaged me privately, sharing their own experiences with fake HOAs. 2 of them were in neighboring counties. Same names: Vanessa Kirkland, Garrett Finch. Same tactics, different victims. I documented everything, added it to my case file. The pattern was expanding beyond what I'd initially found. Day 25, I filed formal complaints with 3 agencies. The State Attorney General's office got a comprehensive fraud report with 52 pages of evidence. The county sheriff received documentation of Finch impersonating a law enforcement officer. The State Real Estate Licensing Board got a complaint against Vanessa with evidence of fraudulent business practices. Each submission was certified mail, return receipt requested. Each one documented with tracking numbers and confirmation emails. I wasn't making noise. I was creating an official record that couldn't be ignored. Vanessa called that afternoon. Her voice was different, not smooth and confident anymore. Strained, angry. "Mr. Hollister, what exactly do you think you're doing?" I put her on speaker, made sure my recording app was running. "I'm protecting my legal property rights and reporting what appears to be criminal fraud." She tried to recover her professional tone. "This is a misunderstanding. We can resolve this. I'm willing to discuss a reasonable settlement." Settlement? That was admission. She knew she was exposed. "There's nothing to settle," I said. "You don't have legal authority over my property. You never did. But I'm curious. How many people have you done this to?" Silence. "Then I don't know what you're talking about." Her voice was tight, defensive. "I'm talking about the 4 people in this neighborhood alone who paid you to make harassment stop. I'm talking about the victims in 2 other counties who have contacted me. I'm talking about over $1 million in documented fraud." Another silence, longer this time. "You're making serious accusations." "I'm making documented statements," I corrected. "There's a difference. Every claim I've made is backed by evidence. Recordings, documents, witnesses. You built this operation on the assumption your targets wouldn't fight back. You were wrong about me." She hung up. I saved the recording, added it to the file. Consciousness of guilt. That's what prosecutors called it when someone's behavior showed they knew they were wrong. Day 28, the article dropped. Front page of the local paper. Fake HOA scheme targets homeowners in 3 counties. Emma had done good work. She'd verified everything independently, interviewed victims, contacted the Attorney General's office for comment. The article laid out the entire operation, Vanessa's background, Finch's terminated law enforcement career, the fake documents, the estimated financial impact. And my story, the one that finally exposed it all. The article included a sidebar comparing real and fake HOA documents, educational, public service. My phone started ringing within an hour. 3 local news stations wanted interviews. 2 victims I hadn't known about called to share their stories. A lawyer specializing in real estate fraud asked if I wanted representation. I declined the lawyer. I was handling this myself. But I talked to the news stations. Brief interviews, factual, no emotion, just clear explanation of what happened and how I documented it. I came here for peace, I told one reporter. But I'm not going to let someone use fake authority to steal property. That's not just about me. It's about every person who's been targeted by this scheme. The response in the neighborhood was immediate. Neighbors who'd been avoiding me knocked on my door to apologize. We didn't know, they said. The flyer looked so official. I understood. That was the point of Vanessa's operation. Look official enough that people didn't question it. One neighbor, an elderly woman, invited me to her house the next day. I want to organize something, she said. A neighborhood meeting, so we can talk about this, so we know our rights. I agreed to attend. That evening, I stood on my porch looking at the red house in the fading light. The boarded window was still there, a reminder of how far Vanessa had gone, but the silence felt different now. Not empty, not isolated. There was solidarity I hadn't expected. People who'd been fooled were angry. People who'd lost money wanted justice. And I had the evidence to give it to them. Vanessa had built her operation on secrecy and intimidation. I'd torn that down with documentation and publicity. The fight wasn't over, but the momentum had shifted. She was defending now. I was advancing. And that changed everything. The idea came to me on day 31 while reading through state HOA regulations. I'd been focused on proving Vanessa's organization was fake, but there was another angle. If no legitimate HOA existed for this area, nothing stopped residents from creating a real one, a legal one, properly registered, properly managed, designed to actually protect homeowners instead of exploiting them. It was elegant. Use the system to defend against someone who'd abused the system, turn her weapon into a shield. I spent 2 days drafting bylaws, real ones this time. I consulted state statutes, reviewed templates from the state HOA association, made sure every clause was compliant. The core principle was simple. This HOA would exist to maintain shared infrastructure like street lights and road maintenance. It would respect individual property rights. No architectural requirements. No mandatory landscaping. No authority to force demolitions or sales. Just basic community services, transparent budgets, and open meetings. Everything Vanessa's fake organization pretended to be but wasn't. I needed signatures, 15 households minimum to petition for HOA formation under state law. I started with the neighbors I'd already talked to. The elderly woman across the street who remembered my grandfather. The man who'd been scammed by Vanessa years ago. The couple who'd organized the neighborhood meeting. I knocked on doors, explained the plan, showed them the proposed bylaws. This protects us, I said. If we have a legitimate HOA, properly registered, nobody can claim fake authority over our properties again. Most people signed immediately. A few were hesitant. I don't want more rules, one man said. I showed him the bylaws. No rules about how you maintain your property. No architectural review. Just cost sharing for communal services and complete financial transparency. He read through it carefully, then signed. By day 34, I had 22 signatures, more than enough. I filed the paperwork with the county recorder and the state corporate registry. $450 in fees, 10 business days for processing. I paid extra for expedited service, 7 days. While I waited, I organized my evidence into a new format, legal complaint. I'd been building a case for public exposure. Now I was building one for court. Civil action against Vanessa Kirkland and Garrett Finch. Fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, tortious interference with property rights. I listed damages, $500,000, compensatory and punitive. The HOA registration came back approved on day 41. Official certificate from the state. Registered legal entity. I called a meeting that evening at the neighbor's house. 23 people showed up. We voted on officers. I was elected president with 15 votes. The elderly woman became secretary. A retired teacher became treasurer. We passed our first resolution. This HOA exists to protect individual property rights and maintain shared community resources. We will not impose architectural standards or interfere with personal property decisions. Everyone voted yes, unanimous. The next morning, I sent a certified letter to Vanessa, printed on official HOA letterhead. This is to inform you that the properties you have been targeting are now part of a legally registered homeowners association. You have no authority to act on behalf of this community. Any further contact constituting harassment will result in legal action. All previous claims made by you regarding HOA authority are hereby formally disputed. I kept a copy, sent it certified mail, documented everything. 2 days later, my private investigator called with his report. He'd been digging for 2 weeks. "You were right," he said. "She's been running this con for 4 years. I found evidence of 3 more shell companies, Kirkland Property Solutions, Riverside Community Management, Heritage HOA Services, all registered to her address, all used for the same scam. I've identified 13 victims across 3 counties. Total estimated fraud, $1.4 million. He sent me the full report, 40 pages, corporate filings, property transfers, victim interviews. It was comprehensive, it was damning. I added it to my legal filing. The civil complaint was now 87 pages with exhibits, timeline, evidence, witness statements, financial analysis, expert opinions. I'd written investigative pieces shorter than this, but court documents required different standards. Every claim needed support. Every fact needed a source. Every conclusion needed logical foundation. I knew how to do this. It was the same discipline as journalism, just formatted for judges instead of readers. Day 45, I filed the complaint, paid the fee, received the case number, served Vanessa and Finch through a professional process server, documented service with photos and affidavit. The complaint was public record now. Anyone could read it. I made sure Emma got a copy. She wrote a follow-up article. Homeowner sues alleged HOA scammers for $500,000. The article included key excerpts from the complaint. The evidence was now even more public. Vanessa's lawyer responded within a week, a cease and desist letter threatening to sue me for defamation. Your client has made numerous false and damaging statements about our client. These statements have caused severe reputational harm. Retract immediately or face legal consequences. I read it twice, then sent a response drafted with my consulting attorney. Every statement made by my client is supported by documented evidence, public records, and sworn testimony. We welcome the opportunity to present this evidence in court. We will not be retracting anything. The state attorney general's office opened a formal investigation 3 days later. I received notification by mail. Your complaint regarding alleged real estate fraud is under active investigation. An investigator will contact you to schedule an interview. Progress, official progress. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was the state's. Vanessa was facing potential criminal charges now, not just civil liability. The stakes had increased dramatically. Finch broke first. His lawyer contacted the district attorney's office and offered cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. I heard about it through unofficial channels, a prosecutor I'd worked with on previous stories. He's giving up everything, she told me. Documents, communications, financial records. He's testifying that Kirkland directed the entire operation, provided the uniform, wrote the scripts. He's admitting to impersonating an officer but claiming he was just following instructions. Typical plea bargain. The smaller fish gave up the bigger one. I sat at my grandfather's table that night, looking at the case file I'd built. It had grown from a few documents to hundreds of pages, from a personal dispute to a criminal investigation, from defending my property to potentially taking down an organized fraud operation. I hadn't planned any of this. I just wanted silence, peace, a place to restore an old house and forget about investigations and deadlines and stress. But sometimes you don't get to choose your fights. Sometimes they choose you. And when they do, you either run or you stand. I'd chosen to stand. And now I was watching the system I'd documented for years finally work the way it was supposed to. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for day 68. Civil court, downtown courthouse, Judge Alina Thorne presiding. I'd researched her, 23 years on the bench, reputation for being thorough, demanding, and fair. She didn't tolerate games. Good, I wasn't playing games. I organized my evidence into a 3-inch binder. 9 tabs, executive summary, chain of title, absence of legal HOA, fraudulent documents analysis, recorded threats, financial trail, victim statements, expert analysis, criminal background checks. Everything indexed, everything labeled, everything ready. I arrived 45 minutes early. The courtroom was old wood paneling and high ceilings, the kind of place built when people believed courtrooms should inspire respect. I sat at the plaintiff's table with my consulting attorney beside me. He was there for procedure, to make sure I followed court rules, but I was handling the presentation. I'd done this before, testified as an expert witness in other cases. I knew how to present evidence clearly, how to stay calm under questioning, how to let facts speak for themselves. Vanessa arrived with her lawyer, a man in an expensive suit. He looked confident. Vanessa looked nervous. She wore a conservative dress, hair pulled back, minimal makeup, trying to look professional, sympathetic. The courtroom started filling. Neighbors, victims, local reporters, about 40 people in the gallery. This wasn't just a legal proceeding anymore. It was public. Exactly what I wanted. Judge Thorne entered at 9 o'clock sharp. Everyone stood. She sat, looked at both tables, opened the file. This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of Hollister versus Kirkland and Finch. Mr. Hollister, you're representing yourself. I stood, yes, Your Honor, with consulting counsel. She nodded. Proceed with your opening statement. I took a breath. This was it. Everything I'd built for the last 2 months came down to this moment. Your Honor, this case is about systematic fraud disguised as legitimate authority. The defendants created a fake homeowners association, used forged documents, and employed a person impersonating a law enforcement officer to coerce property owners into selling below market value. I have documented evidence of at least 13 victims across 3 counties with estimated losses exceeding $1.4 million. I was their next target, but I documented everything. And that documentation will show, beyond any doubt, that the defendants engaged in intentional, organized fraud. I opened my laptop, connected it to the courtroom's display system. 50 slides, clean, professional, timeline across the top of each slide. I started with my property deed, showing clear ownership with no HOA covenant. Then the fake bylaws Vanessa had presented, side-by-side comparison. Notice the font, Garamond. Most government documents use Times New Roman. Notice the logo low resolution, pixelated when enlarged. Notice the absence of any official seal, filing date, or notarization. This document was created to look legitimate, but it has none of the characteristics of actual legal documentation. I moved through the slides methodically. Video footage of Finch in his fake uniform. Audio recording of threats. You have 30 days to demolish this house or we'll do it for you. The fake violation notice with the wrong county name. The flyers distributed to neighbors. Each piece of evidence dated, sourced, authenticated. I wasn't arguing. I was documenting, showing the pattern, building the narrative piece by piece until the conclusion was inevitable. Then the witnesses. The elderly neighbor testified first. She described Vanessa's visit 2 years ago, the threats, the pressure to sell. My son investigated and found no HOA existed. She left after that. Her voice was steady, credible. The retired teacher testified next. He'd sold his property 4 years ago after 6 months of harassment. I paid $190,000 for the house. It was worth $420,000. I lost $230,000 in my retirement plan. I didn't know I could fight back. I just wanted it to stop. His voice cracked on those last words. Finch took the stand next. He'd agreed to testify as part of his plea deal. His lawyer had coached him, but the facts were the facts. Vanessa Kirkland hired me in 2020. She provided the uniform, told me what to say, paid me $500 per visit. I knew it wasn't legal. I needed money after losing my job. I was wrong. I'm sorry. His apology sounded rehearsed, but his testimony was useful. Direct evidence of conspiracy. Direct confirmation of the scam's mechanics. The expert witness testified after lunch, a forensic document examiner I'd hired. She'd analyzed all the fake documents. These documents were created using standard desktop publishing software. The seals are digital images downloaded from the internet. The signatures are either forged or non-existent. None of these documents would pass authentication standards used by government agencies or courts. They are, in my professional opinion, intentionally fraudulent. She had credentials, 30 years of experience, testimony in over 200 cases. Judge Thorne took notes throughout. Vanessa's lawyer tried to fight back during cross-examination. He questioned my motives. Mr. Hollister, you were an investigative journalist. Isn't it true you're doing this for publicity, to restart your career? I kept my voice level. I retired from journalism to find peace. I didn't want publicity. I wanted to restore my grandfather's house. But when someone tries to steal your property with fake authority, you have two choices: submit or document. I documented. If that helps others who were victimized, that's a benefit. But it wasn't my original motive. He tried another angle. You created your own HOA after this dispute started. Isn't that retaliatory? I shook my head. It's protective. If no legitimate HOA exists, residents are vulnerable to exactly the kind of fraud the defendants perpetrated. Creating a legal, transparent HOA fills that gap. Every step followed state law. We have proper registration, elected officers, bylaws designed to protect individual property rights. That's the opposite of what the defendants did. The final piece of evidence was an email discovered during investigation, from Vanessa to an associate. Target next quarter, corner lot on Maple Street. Elderly widow, no family nearby. Estimated profit $200,000. Use standard protocol. The date was 3 weeks before she'd shown up at my door. Premeditation, planning, clear evidence of intent. I displayed it on the screen. Let it sit there. Let everyone see the calculated nature of the operation. No one spoke for 10 seconds. The silence said everything. Judge Thorne reviewed her notes, looked at both tables. I've heard enough for a preliminary ruling. The evidence presented shows clear indicators of systematic fraud, conspiracy, and intentional interference with property rights. I'm granting a preliminary injunction prohibiting the defendants from contacting any property owners in 3 counties. I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution review. The civil trial will proceed. She looked at Vanessa. Miss Kirkland, if even half of what's been presented here is true, you're facing serious consequences. I suggest you consider that carefully. The courtroom erupted in quiet conversation. The judge banged her gavel once, then left. I packed up my binder, disconnected my laptop. Neighbors approached, shook my hand, thanked me. The reporter asked for a comment. Justice takes time, I said, but it works when you have evidence and patience. Vanessa left quickly, avoiding cameras. Her lawyer looked grim. Finch stood in the hallway alone, staring at nothing. I walked out into afternoon sunlight, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not peace, not yet. But vindication. The system had worked, truth had won. Now we just had to wait for the consequences. 5 months after the hearing, the verdicts came down. Vanessa Kirkland was found guilty on multiple counts: 4 counts of wire fraud, 3 of conspiracy, 2 of impersonation, 1 of extortion. The jury needed only 6 hours. The evidence was overwhelming. She received 4 years in federal prison, 5 years supervised release, and was ordered to pay over $2 million in restitution to 13 victims. Her licenses were permanently revoked. She'd never work in real estate again. Finch got probation and community service. His cooperation earned leniency, but the judge reminded him, "You wore a uniform you didn't deserve. You frightened people in their own homes." He was assigned to speak at youth facilities, teaching others about consequences. 2 weeks later, the civil settlement followed. Vanessa's assets were liquidated and divided among victims. The retired teacher got his savings back. Other families were repaid. I received $75,000, enough to finish the house. I donated part to a legal aid fund for elderly homeowners and used the rest for final repairs: roof, plumbing, floors. The legitimate HOA we'd formed kept going, quiet, transparent, uneventful. Just neighbors sharing upkeep costs. Other communities asked for our bylaws. We sent them copies, hoping to help others protect themselves. 6 months after the trial, I stood on my grandfather's restored porch. The 1920 red paint gleamed in morning sunlight. Inside, polished floors and bright windows reflected the life I'd rebuilt here. The neighborhood had changed too, not in appearance but in trust. People spoke again, shared coffee, laughed together. No one mentioned lawsuits anymore. That chapter was closed. Sometimes I reread emails from other victims. One wrote, "You made me believe the system could work again. Thank you for fighting when we couldn't." I kept them as reminders. Truth mattered. Documentation mattered. Standing up mattered. I started writing again. Not exposés, just essays about restoration, about bringing things back to life. Not just houses, but trust, peace, the kind of quiet that felt earned. The barn out back had become my workshop. I'd cleared decades of junk, repaired the frame, added new lights. With simple tools, I tried to learn what my grandfather had known instinctively: measure precisely, cut cleanly, join pieces that last. The work was quiet, steady, meditative. I built a bookshelf, a coffee table, small things but solid, built to last. Some nights I sat on the porch watching stars, thinking how different this year had been from what I'd planned. I'd bought this place expecting peace and found conflict first. But the peace that followed felt earned. I defended more than property. I defended the idea that truth and ownership still meant something, that people couldn't just take what wasn't theirs with fake papers and empty threats. I opened the old photo album again. My grandfather in 1958 standing before the red house, hammer in hand, grinning with pride. Next to it now a new photo, me, same spot, same pride, 2 generations apart. He'd have approved not of the fight itself but of how it was fought, with precision not rage, with evidence not emotion, with his lessons about building things right so they'd last. The garden had returned too. I'd cleared the weeds, replanted roses, rebuilt the stone border he'd once laid. They bloomed red each summer against the house he built. A young family had moved in next door. Their toddler waved from the yard. I waved back. Ordinary life, the kind I'd hoped for. This was the silence I'd earned, not just absence of noise, but presence of safety. The calm of knowing the fight was over and justice had been served. No more threats, no more battles left to fight. Just mornings that began quietly and nights that ended in peace. The house creaked softly in the wind, old wood settling like a steady breath. My grandfather's voice lingered in memory, measure twice, cut once. I'd built my case the same way, careful, precise, made to endure. And it had. The house still stood, I still stood, the silence was restored. And this time it was protected.